Long time ago. So, hi everybody. By the way, glad you're here. And Jamie, you brought up just some memories in my mind. You know, from 2013 until 2016, I worked with Ken Schwaber and Scrum.org. And at some point of time, we had this beautiful guy working with us, Dave Starr, and he was sort of COO, whatever, but he's like me, not too much into titles. And at some point, we were thinking about trying to expand, let's say, sort of our program. So, you know, we have professional Scrum trainers. And we're thinking about should we add something to that, like something like, I don't know, professional Scrum practitioners, something that people can show to the world and help them sort of distinguish themselves. And I know at some point of time, just to make fun of it, I said, oh, well, let's introduce a new thing and let's call it Scrum Wizards. And that was
Yeah.
that was supposed to be a joke, and now it seems like you're taking this seriously. So it's cool.
Oh,
So
just for fun, not too serious.
yeah, cool. Scrum Wizard. So we thought let's add that as a role or a position. It is cool. And another thing that Jim, you were just talking about before uh, the session started, and I want to share that with people. You just said that you've got 5 speakers from Scrum Day Madison. So I was there in September. Jamie also shared, I don't know if that's a secret I'm giving away, but you also shared that you're considering setting up some sort of online event with the Scrum Masters of the universe. Um, and I remember the beautiful event of Scrum Day Madison in September, meeting lots of great people, a beautiful event. Now, and that also reminded me not all events are that amazing. I feel like often I'm probably too serious also, but I feel like too often too many events are about entertainment, and I don't like that. I like entertainment, but in a way not as a Scrum event. So I like to share information with people and not just stand on the stage and jump around and dance around and then people have a really fun whatever sort of time. And you know, like 5 minutes after your session, they would have forgotten what you've talked about. And that's something that I see so often. And it's so strange with event organizers. They're actually also looking for people like that. I've gone through strange things. So I've got these very mixed feelings about events. Some of them are really great, but most of them are like, yeah, you know what? And sometimes I even wonder why they invite me. You know, if you get invited to come speak at an event and then you get sort of sidetracked on a little backstage somewhere where you get to talk for a few people out of all the people that registered. I sometimes wonder why event organizers even bother to I feel like being a filler sometimes. But anyway, some things about events. But this is a great outcome of the event because at Scrum Day Madison, I remember Jamie and also Mark Metzer talking to you guys, and I shared my not a frustration, but the sort of the limitation of events. Meaning, you have to say what you need to say in about 40, at most 45 minutes. If you're like a really important person, that would be 60 minutes. So that never happens to me. So I always have to bring my story in 40 minutes. And then I always feel I have to condense it, and I share that with you, Jamie, and said, you know what, come back to the Scrum Masters of the universe and bring the full story. And that was my total ambition, to bring you guys the full story. And then I started working on it, and then I realized, oh my God, it's not really the full story. It's almost the full story. But I'll come back on that. I'll at least give you a glimpse of the things that are not included. Otherwise, we'll never get done in about 90 minutes or so that we have. So thank you, Scrum Masters of the Universe, the meetup, Jamie, the leadership team for inviting me. Thank you for all the people joining us. It's amazing, beautiful. It looks like sort of my success rate at this event, let's say, is bigger than that last event. One of the last events I think I spoke for about 40 people out of a total sold out event of 1,100 people. So in terms of people registering for this fund, it's about, I believe, about 220 people. So almost 60 people joining. So my success rate is really going up. Cool. Now, talking about moving your Scrum downfield. I know if anybody ever been in a session of mine, I've shared this so many times that I stopped doing it at some point of time. But here I live in Antwerp, in Belgium. It's the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, and I work a lot at home. I still do a lot of online trainings and so on. And this is a little wooden box I have in my office here in Belgium, my home office. It's something that resonates with me a lot. It says life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself. Something I truly love. And in a way, not just for life, but also for my beautiful world of Scrum and Agile. So if I would be literally translating this, it would be Scrum isn't about finding it, it's about creating it yourself. But that was too easy, so I converted that a little bit into this text. Just a call to people, don't sit around for Scrum or waiting for Scrum to happen. Go out there, play the game, make it happen yourself. In that sense, shape your Scrum yourself, your instance of Scrum. Don't sit around waiting for people. This typical attitude, they don't get it and they don't do this and we don't get to do this and we're not allowed, whatever. Do something that you can do. Try to make the best out of what you can. So it's a bit of a call to action. And why is that? Because it's something that I miss a lot. And this is the meetup of the Scrum Masters of the universe. So we've got Scrum Masters from all over the universe joining us, entering with spaceships and so on, whatever, to be here with some sort of very, very long distance connections, whatever. It's something that I miss. So please, 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 dear Scrum Masters of the universe, be those people that are challenging the status quo. Something that I totally miss, not totally, but I miss a lot these days. And that's what I want to talk about. So please help moving your Scrum downfield by challenging at least the status quo. I think if a Scrum Master would be sort of a product, you would ship it in a box. I think that should be the baseline on the box next to the product title, Scrum Master, challenging the status quo so that if people open up the box, that they know what is going to happen. Their status quo will be challenged. And that's, I think, really, really, really important. But that's sort of a little bit of a start. This lady wants to continue. So what about getting to the point? So allow me to do that. In a little book I wrote, and it's actually 10 years ago, so in 2013, in November 2013, it was published. I wrote it in the spring of that year. That book was called Scrum, a Pocket Guide, or a Pocket Guide to Scrum. I updated the book in 2019 and again in 2021. Now I kept in this is the last statement of the book, saying, expressing my belief. It's not just a hope, my belief, my conviction also that at some point of time, Scrum will become the normal, the standard way of working. And at some point of time, it will be so normal that organizations will have reinvented themselves around Scrum, or what I call re-emerged around it. Now, that is a little bit of wishful thinking so far. I think we've got some work to do to make this actually happen. So I believe that we need to shape our Scrum to make this actually happen. And as I was working on a 4th edition, so this is a scoop, big news. So I'm working on an update of my book. And as I was doing that, I was looking at sort of the chapters in which I try to describe sort of the past and past evolutions of HL, the HL movement and Scrum within it. Because the previous statement is a final statement of the book. It's sort of looking forward. Now, in my book, I've also tried to describe the past of Scrum and HL. And I've used a model for that. It's called the Technology Adoption Lifecycle. It's by Jeffrey Moore. It's got a couple of books out there. It's a famous book is Crossing the Chasm and so on. And what is that adoption lifecycle about? Jeffrey Moore had identified at some point of time and described it in his books and models, whatever, that for mostly disruptive technologies or technological products, there's something different in the adoption of such a product versus a traditional classical whatever product. And let me explain. So Jeffrey Moore found that also for highly disruptive, innovative new products and new technologies, it always starts with the product being embraced and adopted and cherished by enthusiasts, people that look out to be pioneers and so on. They don't care about, let's say, are there still a lot of bugs or whatever in it. They just want to adopt the newest of the newest. So enthusiasts combined with visionaries. And that's sort of a phase in the adoption lifecycle that Jeffrey Moore, or that is called the early market. So there's an early market where a new product out on the market is only adopted by people that really believe in it, that want to try it out, that want to be those pioneers, that want to be the forerunners of that new product. Now, I believe that the technology adoption lifecycle also applies to Agile. Agile is a highly disruptive paradigm in our world. It's started certainly with technology, still a lot in the world of technology. So I believe this model applies also to Agile. Now, Agile, as we all know, was in a way founded or born in 2001, Agile Manifesto. So that means that's sort of the early market phase of this thing. Now, what Jeffrey Moore found was different for highly disruptive technology products versus traditional, classical, let's say more regular products, is that after the early market, there is a phase in the adoption of such a product or disruptive technology that it's very unclear what is happening. So that the product seems to go in some sort of chasm, some sort of black box, and nobody knows what's happening. Yeah. Now, there are also products that never come out of the chasm, that disappear, that die somewhere in the chasm. But products that come out of it are now adopted by what Jeffrey Moore calls pragmatists, sort of the early majority, people that are not interested in the fancy, whatever new stuff of it, but the potential use of it, and how that new thing might solve a problem that isn't being solved by an existing solution or an existing product. So pragmatists, people that are interested in this thing, and in the pragmatists in the market phase, let's say, the adoption phase that the product goes to, is what Jeffrey Moore calls the bowling alley. So there's a lot of bowling pins. So there are versions of different types of products and different versions targeted at different markets and different audiences, solving specific solutions and so on. Now, I think the world agrees, and I've described in my book also, that around 2006, 2007, Agile as a new, highly disruptive paradigm came out of the chasm. And suddenly it became widely spread and more widely spread than ever before. So it came out of the chasm. Now, I was just reading also, I don't know if anybody read it, Jim Highsmith, Agile pioneer, even from the, let's say, pre-Agile days already pioneering. So Jim Highsmith recently published a book with sort of his personal memories, almost sometimes like his personal diary of his life and career in not just Agile, but in technology in general. And there was a fascinating thing that he brought up in his book. He said that actually in 2007, he relates the sort of the rise, the ascendance of Agile methods and the Agile way of working. He connects that to the rise of very important innovations in the digital era, let's say, like Facebook going mobile, the first iPhone being launched in 2007. GitHub was working on interesting innovations and so on. And he just said there was this enormous boost in sort of digitalization, digital products and digital services and things going digital, that he said that is probably part of the explanation why Agile suddenly came out of the chasm and started growing enormously. Now, the result of that bowling alley phase is that within the different types of products that are trying to achieve the same, in general, there's the outcome is that there's one gorilla product, meaning a sort of market leader. And he calls it a gorilla. Why? Because he uses it as a metaphor to say a gorilla is a market leader that is very difficult to overthrow. There's also the potential alternative model that's more like a king. There could be a king coming out of the bowling alley, but a king can be overthrown. You can start a rebellion, a revolution against the king. You can overthrow a king, but a gorilla not. Or not so easily, at least. And my point of view was in my book, and still is, by the way, that from after Agile crossed the chasm, came out of the chasm. From all the agile approaches, Scrum is by far the gorilla. Scrum is the most adopted one. It sort of became sort of the standard. In that sense, it's the one to join or to oppose. So a lot of the opposition against Scrum, in a way, since those days, in a way, is reinforcing the idea that Scrum is the gorilla of the agile methods. Now, in my book, I also, up to the previous edition, I looked then at that bowling alley, and it feels and it looks like a whirlwind to me. Now, I've been, like some people said, I've been traveling the world at events, working with people, doing classes sometimes, and I've tried to distinguish sort of what I call the waves of Scrum. And I feel like since Agile crossed the chasm and Scrum becoming that gorilla, part of it was Scrum being adopted mostly for IT purposes. Software development or just IT development adopted by the IT parts of organizations. And then in the next Scrum wave, and every wave, for whatever reason, seems to be taking about 5 or 6 years. Now, it's not black and white, so there's no clear barriers or borders between them. But in the next wave of Scrum, it was fascinating to see that there was a lot of sort of divergence, what I call sort of still derivative methods. People wanting to do Scrum, but not wanting to call it Scrum. People creating and launching new methods that looked a lot like Scrum, but still gave it different and whatever funny names. A lot of them also disappeared again. So there was a lot of divergence. But another core theme in that next wave of Scrum that I situate around 2010, 2011 until 2015, 16, another theme was scale. And I remember working at Scrum Talk with Ken Schwaber around 2014. We gave birth to what we call the Nexus framework, the framework for scale professional Scrum, because everybody knows by that time scale was thing. And it was part of that growth of Scrum because large organizations were also discovering Scrum and they also wanted to apply and adopt Scrum. So they brought in this whole idea of scale. They also brought in this idea of hybrid things or renaming things and so on. It's also the period where the terminology of Scrum sort of went all over the place. At some point of time, you couldn't imagine a company anymore that wasn't working in sprints. You couldn't imagine a company that didn't have product owners in place, or a company that didn't have something like backlogs. But they sort of cherry-picked elements of Scrum often. So that's again sort of the divergence. And my hope in my book around 2021, or I adopted it in 2020, was that people would, after that wave of divergence and all over the place and sort of cherry-pick terminology and that focus on scale and large things, I hope, because it wasn't really working, I hope that people would discover the simplicity of Scrum again. That in the first Scrum wave. Now, as I was working on the update of my book, I found out, looking back and bringing all those pieces of puzzles together of working, by now working for 20 years with Scrum. And I want to share that. But let me first share what Jeffrey Moore says. After the bowling alley, resulting in a gorilla product, in our case, a gorilla method, let's say Scrum, there's a phase called the tornado. Tornado is sort of, sounds very much like my whirlwind, I believe. Very, very wild, very chaotic, lots of things happening. Yeah. Now, to continue the story of the technology option lifecycle, after the tornado, there's a main street, and I think it speaks for itself, the term. It's conservatives, people that would only adopt it because it's really everybody's doing it, and whatever sort of conservatives that have been waiting for a long time to adopt it and so. And in the end, there's this assimilation phase where only laggards would still go for the new product. Now, as I was updating my book, I was also looking at this chapter in which I described this, and looking at, we've had those 3 waves of Scrum. And I truly believe that we are entering the 4th wave of Scrum, and there's no way of predicting what it will be about. And I've updated my terminology a little bit. So the first wave of Scrum that IT perspective to Scrum, IT adoption of Scrum, then the divergence and core theme scale. And in the third Scrum wave, what has happened, rather than embracing the simplicity of Scrum and going back to the essence of Scrum and the sort of the cohesion of Scrum, restoring the cohesion of Scrum and capitalizing on that, there was this wave of all these agile transformations. So Scrum adopted as part of some whatever agile transformation. And I don't know how that is for you guys, but I haven't seen one successful agile transformation. I have seen lots of money spent. I've seen lots of people burned. I've seen lots of attempts to adopt Scrum, but it always ends up in what I call industrializing your Scrum to death, imposing it on people rather than thriving on enthusiasm and getting people to buy into that and inviting them. And it was very much focused on the process aspect of Scrum, just working in sprints and so on. That is an achievement. So the waterfall process, in a way, has, at least at the surface, been replaced by that iterative incremental way of working of Scrum. But that's about it. And I notice in a lot of companies, there's some sort of change or agile fatigue. People are getting tired of it. They've tried it at scale. They tried lots of things. They tried it with agile transformations and so on. So I hope that there are plenty of Scrum Masters around the world and Scrum practitioners that would be able to to stand up, challenge the status quo, and share that message that there is a better way. There must always be, there is a better way, and help shape Scrum. And I believe that in that sort of entering that fourth wave of Scrum around the world, sort of generally, that we are also entering that tornado phase of the technology adoption lifecycle. And what Jeffrey Moss also describes in that as typical to that tornado phase, that a lot of people will just keep on doing it. But the companies that will stick out are the companies that will capitalize on the opportunity of using that new technology, that new product, in our case, Scrum, that very specific implementation of that new agile paradigm as something that helps them drive forward to fundamentally rethink how they work and how to organize for that work. So in general, it's called new infrastructure businesses and so on. In this case, it's what I hoped with my statement of my book, re-emerging the organization around Scrum. But it's not happening massively, but that's also normal for that tornado phase. I hope that people would stand up and help shape this. And I think, honestly, that also this sort of message is also why will not resonate with sort of the masses around the world that have adopted Scrum, because they're not interested in being this sort of forerunner again and standing up and pioneering and be driven by this ambition to get the most out of Scrum. Now, Lady reminds you of the fact that I'm sort of ending with the conclusion. So let's start somewhere. And I think in the invitation to this meetup, Jamie, Anu, and so on, thank you. You've pointed out that in 2020, I wrote a paper. It was the beginning of the Corona crisis. In Belgium, we were in the middle of the lockdown situation. I don't know if anybody remembers that. Staying at home, not touching people, whatever, you can't see people, whatever. So my classes got cancelled, my consulting got cancelled, because you couldn't come near to other human beings, so to speak, and even if wearing a mouth mask and so, but a face mask. So I used that time to write a paper, and I'd call that paper "Moving Your Scrum Downfield." And that title was a reference to the old paper, 1986, where we got the name Scrum from. The new product development game. They call it "Moving the Scrum Downfield." I think it also shows that they're not really familiar or knowledgeable in the game of rugby, by the way. But I'm not either. So we can just keep going with that sort of ignorance. So moving your Scrum downfield. What I wanted to achieve with that paper is to help people see what Scrum is about beyond the terminology, because people were using terminology and had no idea what it is. and then also cherry picking. But what was even worse, and it still goes on, by the way, you have these sort of debates, war of words across the world on forums, LinkedIn and so on, about interpretations of the Scrum Guide. And by that time, I was so fed up with that that I want to describe what Scrum is about, and I want to describe the 6 essential traits of the game. You're getting the most out of Scrum, or you're really understanding Scrum if you're playing the game, and you would respect that simplicity of Scrum. If you would respect Scrum's DNA, so beyond or underneath the process, underlying the process is what I call Scrum's DNA, the combination of empiricism, inspection, adaptation, plus self-organization. So not just the process, but also the people aspect of Scrum, where you create an environment where players are willing and able and feel safe enough to actually demonstrate accountability, where you don't have to hold people accountable, tell them that they are responsible, where we create environments where people spontaneously, almost proactively demonstrate that they can be accountable, that they are accountable, where you use product backlog and all the work in sprints to create transparency over the flow of value. When you close the loops, when you thrive on feedback loops regularly, and not just, I mean with closing loops, not just a sprint and not just a daily scrum on top of the sprint, which is a feedback loop, but also feedback loops within a sprint that come from your testing practices, from your engineering practice, from in general how you do development, like test-driven development, to give an example. That is about creating feedback loops. So within a sprint, you should have this whole set of feedback loops to help you see, are we on the right way? Are we doing the right stuff? Are we building it also in the right way? And not just blindly follow the process and then see what happens, but take matters into hand and where you live and enact the Scrum value. So that was that paper, Moving Your Scrum Downfield. I updated it slightly in September of this year. But the essence is still there, six traits. Now, if you've been around for a while, so I wrote that paper in 2020, and then I found for myself, this is not nearly enough. Helping people see, helping people understand the 6 essential traits of the game, that's fine, that is important, but there is more, and there should be more. And then I thought back of the period of 2016, 2017, so I had stopped my exclusive work for Ken and Scrum the Talk, and I went out in the world again, in that sense, doing consulting and working with organizations, working with teams. And that was sort of the middle of that wave of Scrum, where it was all about agile transformations. And I wanted to offer people an alternative to what already were a lot of failing agile transformations. I wanted to help people to make it simple again, to make it small again, rather than the industrial approach to transformations, copy pasting what other people are doing, try to implement cookbook models and so on, and just blindly doing what other people doing or what some sort of cookbook was saying. So and I call that reversify. To reversify, because it's a verb, it's something you do, it's an action, it's not a model. And the idea of reversify, I found this beautiful old English word, reversify. The essence of it is to turn something into verse again. In that sense, restore poetry. In that sense, for me, it's about restoring the harmony. So taking an existing piece of something and restoring the harmony of it again. And how to do that? I brought to some organizations in a way two ways to do that. First of all, reimagine your Scrum, and reimagine your Scrum in order to reemerge the structures around it. Because that sort of blindly copy pasting what other people are doing was really not working. So and that all came together because reimagine your Scrum in a way is a combination of two intermixed, intertwined, intermingled, whatever, two big feedback loops. One is about reimagining your Scrum. And I call it reimagining your Scrum, but do it one product at a time. Because in those agile transformations, organizations sort of wanted all of their teams to adopt Scrum over the weekend, let's say. On Friday, they went home, non-Scrum teams. On Monday, they came back and they were supposed to be Scrum teams. And they all had to apply the same practices, all had to work in sprints of 2 weeks with all of their sprints starting and ending on the same date. And that totally baffled me. And it was not working. It was not delivering results. It was not delivering the benefits that I believe Scrum could and should and can deliver. So I asked them, so let's take a step back and let's have a look at one instance of Scrum. And let's see what is the product that you're trying to deliver here. And let's have a look at that product. Be very clear that we know the product, because in the end, in that paper in 2020, I already described product as the vehicle of value. It's the vehicle through which we try to deliver value. Yeah? So knowing your product is really important, because I've seen a lot of companies just establishing Scrum teams within silos, within departments, without anybody taking care of sort of the overarching product that all those individual teams were working on. And once you know your product, and I believe Mary Iqbal from Scrum Day Madison in a few weeks will be sharing a talk about knowing your product and how important that is. So that's really cool. Yeah. So know your product. Start with product first, because you have to organize your Scrum for your product, not organize your Scrum within the existing ways of organizing and working within the organization. Start with product, then organize your Scrum for that, so that you can grow towards delivering what I call tasty sashimi slices of your product regularly. Things that people can taste, that they can digest, that they love to live on. Yeah, but then that is already a very difficult step. Reimagining your Scrum, taking that step back. But the purpose in the end should be to re-emerge the structures, the organization around Scrum, so that you can optimize for value. And let me take you through that today. That's sort of what I would like to focus on. That second feedback loop, that reorganizing things. But in the end, this, what I call reversification, or to reverse for your organization, that is what I nowadays call moving your Scrum downfield. And I don't know if you notice it, but with regards to the title of that paper, I've added a little nuance. In that sense, I've added your between brackets. Why? Because I believe, and I think we all should participate in shaping Scrum, in moving our Scrum instances downfield, so that collectively, bottom up, we will start moving Scrum as a movement, a global movement downfield. And what I mean with moving downfield is making progress, going forward, meaning downfield means towards our goals, our ambitions. And we are not fighting another team, obviously, like in a scrummy rugby, but we are fighting bureaucracy, latency, delays, heavy processes, governance. We are fighting burnouts of people. We are fighting inhumane treatment of people, and so on. And it's time that we start moving our Scrum downfield to really, really make progress. And it starts by understanding, why are you in the end implementing Scrum? Because Scrum cannot be the purpose of Scrum. Don't implement Scrum because of Scrum. Do it for a reason. Know your why. And that's part of that idea of reversification also. But to go back to the essence of Scrum in that paper again, 2020, moving your Scrum downfield, the first version already, I called Scrum as a definition, an empirical framework that enables people to derive value from complex challenges. And I hope we all understand that software development is certainly a complex challenge. New product development is certainly a complex challenge. So complexity is why we need empiricism. It's also why we need people, why we need self-organizing people, why we need to thrive on collective intelligence. But in the end, for me, the purpose of Scrum is value, delivering value. And why is that so important? Because a lot of companies, even the ones that are adopting Scrum, haven't shifted yet from volume-oriented thinking to a value-oriented thinking. And volume is like manufacturing. It's like mass production. That's not what Scrum or Agile is about. That was the industrial paradigm. That's from the previous century. Just to say that sort of the underlying thinking under why people are doing Scrum hasn't always changed. If they're just using Scrum to do more, faster, whatever, get more features out on the market, that is a volume thinking. That is a sort of thinking you would apply on machines or industrial manufacturing, but not in a creative, complex world of Scrum. So if you think about the purpose of Scrum, Scrum cannot be the purpose of Scrum. In the end, value is the purpose of Scrum. And as I said, product is the vehicle to deliver value. So know your product, because your product will be the vehicle through which you will deliver value. And if you still want to think about product, think about in terms of it might be a good, it might be a product, it might be a service, it might be a digital service. It can be, in other words, can be tangible, it can be non-tangible. It can be potentially product being the outcome of some sort of bounded process or a set of actions. That's all fine. That is what a product is. But in Scrum terms, a product is supposed to deliver value, and not just value in general, but value to the consumers of the product. A product has consumers, people that have to use it, that have to consume it, that have to apply it to solve certain problems or issues to help them in their professional life or their personal life. So for me, in Scrum terms, a product is only a product if it delivers value to the consumers of the product. To overcome this idea of component-oriented thinking and little applications hidden somewhere deep in the organization, and then we fool ourselves massively by saying, yeah, but this is a product too. Yeah, it's not a product if you're not building it start to finish or not delivering end-to-end value to the consumers. So think about when you want to know your product, important, because if you want to organize and reorganize and optimize for value, then you have to start with product, because product is a vehicle to deliver value. And this is just some sort of silly justification. If you think this is really new, it's not really. Already, I remember 2011, which is a long time ago, 12 years and a half. There was a beta version, a first trial version of a new class that we were building at Scrum Talk. It was called a professional Scrum product owner class. Up to that point, Scrum Talk had a PSM class and a PSD class. And in that class already, the central theme, the core theme was value, period. It's all about value. And that was just to overcome, by that time, the idea of a product owner being the one writing out user stories, converting requirements of people into user stories, and then showing that over to the developers to have them do that. That was not really what we were looking for. And even longer ago, the Agile Manifesto already said it in its first principle. Our highest priority is to satisfy them through valuable software. Not just software, but valuable software. It doesn't say through early and continuous delivery of more software. It says continuous delivery of valuable software. So that's really, value has always been at the heart of Agile and of Scrum. So first step of re-emerging structures around Scrum to optimize value is what I call ARM for value. And to ARM is an acronym. Now, how to do that? What do I mean with how to ARM for value? Meaning, ARM for value, assume value first. In that sense, organize your product backlog, order your product backlog, add items in your product backlog against the assumption that this is going to deliver value. That these are the most valuable, that this is the most valuable work to do right now. Order for that, be dynamic, make sure that always the highest value items are always high on your product backlog. So make that assumption of value. You could say anticipate value, that's also an A. You could say assign value on your product backlog. I like assume because it's an assumption, because you will never know whether it's really valuable what you're doing unless you release. Just building your product backlog around value and then creating increments without releasing them, it will still keep you blindfolded. You will still not have any idea. So you have to release. And what do you release in Scrum? Increments. Increments are output. But we want to move from output to outcome. So you don't just want to release in the market, you want to capture what the effect is of your work, what the impact is of your work on the market. So in that sense, talking about closing the loops, you want to close the feedback loop with your users or your consumers. Otherwise, you still have no idea. If you're building an increment and you're sending it to the testing department or the release department, you have no idea. You're not closing the feedback loop with your users. You're just postponing the release. You're postponing the ability to close that feedback loop. Doesn't make sense. And keep doing that. Sprint after sprint after sprint. Keep producing increments that you assume are going to be value, and then validate or invalidate your assumption of value by measuring the outcome, the impact that you have. And that's an important shift, to move from output to outcome. From creating increments and releasing them to measuring, capturing the impact that you have with your work. So that is what I call to arm for value. So know your product so that you can think about your users, your consumers, and think about what will they appreciate, what will be most valuable for them. And then work with that. And if you want to think about value, because value is a very generic word, it's a general word. If you want to have some ideas around thinking about value, I always start with thinking in terms of value for whom. Who are we trying to serve? For whom are we trying to create value? And obviously it starts, I hope that is a very logical thing. It starts with the consumers of your product, of your service, or the thing that you're creating. They want to get value out of it, meaning they want to get benefits out of it. They want to have a happier life. They want to be able to do their work more easily. They want to have some value out of it. Obviously, you want to produce value for what I call the sponsors, your sponsors, the people within the organization, people representing the organization that are sponsoring you, that are funding you, that are making sure that you can, that as a team, you can do your work. So they want to have value out of the work too. And then not to forget, because I think the first two ones, consumers and sponsors, whatever you call them, I think they're very, very obvious and almost too obvious. In that sense, imagine you have really happy customers or consumers. Imagine you have really happy sponsors, but imagine you have really unhappy teams, the people doing the work, which I call the creators. That makes no sense. It makes no sense to have happy consumers, happy sponsors, but that we keep burning out our teams, our workforce all the time. That our people keep leaving the company, keep resigning or wanting to move to another team or another department, whatever, but not here. Makes no sense. That at least those three should be in balance. In that sense, the adoption of Scrum should also be valuable for the people doing the work. So for the people consuming the work, for the people sponsoring the work, but also for the people doing the work. So that is important. And you know what? The funny thing is, that's where it starts, but it doesn't have to end there. I've been talking about this a lot with organizations, and at some point in time, at some session, after the session, a lady in the Netherlands approached me and said, "Hey, Gunther, what about value for the environment? What about value for the planet? Let's not just be so hyper commercial about it, and let's also think." And that's a really good idea. Let's think or rethink our position as an organization, as an enterprise in the world, in society, and on the planet even. And what if we would not just try to deliver value to the consumers, to the sponsors, and even to the creators, but also make sure that we deliver value, that we make something that is beneficial to the planet, to society too. So it starts certainly with the first three one, but it doesn't have to stop there. And certainly on the last thing, environmental impact, really important these days, and it will only get worse. Look at what's happening at the large conference somewhere in the Middle East right now. The IT sector has a role to play. The IT sector as a whole has the footprint in terms of I gotta say it like I feel it is damaging the planet. We have the footprint of an average country at least, and it's increasing, and it's not just linearly increasing, but it's exponentially increasing. We all know that software is everywhere. We thrive on software. We've got service all over the world. We've got software. We use machines. We need electricity, whatever. Think about the impact we can have as an IT sector. So this is a call to action. Now that lady that I talked about was called Marie-Hélène Pilon. You might see her name on the screen. I got in touch with Scrum Talk with Dave West, CEO of Scrum Talk. They had a cool talk about it. That was published as an interview on the website of Scrum Talk. You can look up things. I've seen that companies like Microsoft with Azure, even Amazon with the Amazon Web Services and so on, are really focusing on this more and more and more. So there is growing awareness that as IT people, we can actually help the planet by trying to reduce our footprint, the impact we have as IT people and with our services and applications and infrastructure on the world. Yeah, so think about it. But if you then want to know about arming for value, so assign value, assume value, anticipate for value, release often, and then you want to measure. So you want to work with value. You want to organize your product backlog to deliver value to consumers, to stakeholders, sponsors, and even to the planet. And then you want to know, how are we actually successful? Are we actually delivering value to those parties, let's say? And then you want to think about value for your consumers, and you might think about parameters like customer satisfaction or user satisfaction, I don't know, user retention, usage of your systems, a number of visits, potentially market share for sponsors, often a lot, certainly in commercial organizations or for-profit organizations, they will be mostly interested in something with money, in that sense, revenues, profits, sales, increased sales, whatever, maybe hurting the competition sometimes in this beautiful, ugly world that we live in. Value for the creators, the people doing the work in the sense of engagement, energy, a decrease in turnover of people not leaving the company anymore, the ability to hire like really great new people again, high potentials, decrease in absenteeism, decrease in sickness, in burnouts, in depression rates, and so on. All signs that you might be delivering value for the creators of the product. And for the environment, you want to think in terms of power consumption, exhaust, and so on. There are really great ways to think about this. So in general, how to improve, how to increase sustainability. Yeah. So think about that. And the same, to put it differently. So question one, are we actually creating value? Are you delivering value? You can measure that. So by arming for it, in the end, you can measure that with parameters like on the screen. Now, I want to point out that these are just samples. Think about value for your product, your consumers in your organization, and you're part of the organization. What would you call value, and how would you measure that? So think about it. These are just examples of potential indicators, metrics that you can have in place. Satisfaction, usage of your systems, something with financial returns, something with engagement of the teams, and so on. Now, for me, agility and being agile, and even in the Agile Manifesto, certainly in Scrum, but even in the Agile Manifesto, Agile was all about delivering valuable software to your users and your consumers. So agility means being able to sustain your value creation, being able to create value, not just do more, not just do it quicker, but do the right stuff, build it in the right way. The right stuff meaning the stuff that brings value, that is appreciated, that brings money, that brings benefits, not just doing more. Now, that's only the first part of the story. I believe that agility should also be about discovering new value. Again, new value for the consumers, the sponsors, the creators, and even the planet or society. So, and how can you potentially measure that you're delivering new value? By looking at your products. How many new features are you building into your products? How many new ideas are you actually adding to your products? How many old features that nobody uses are you getting out of it and replacing it with new features? The same at the product portfolio level. How many great, exciting new products have you built over the past couple of years? Rather than just updating, tweaking existing products and tweaking existing features within existing products and so on. So that should be what Agile is also about, And that's being sure that you have a high actual value, but you're also able to discover new value, new sources of value, so that you keep innovating, that you can keep moving on, that you can discover new products. Yeah? And agility should be sustaining that. So introducing Scrum should help you free up energy and time of people to think about new stuff and not just continue that rat race of tweaking and updating and maintaining the old stuff, fighting technical debt all the time and so on. Yeah? And agility can be measured in parameters like how much code do you have in your system that is actually not being used? And how about getting that code out? By the way, that is also one of the things that will help you reduce the power consumption of your systems. The same with unused parts of databases and so on. You have no idea, but that actually takes energy. Now, it's not just impeding, blocking you in adding stuff and discovering new stuff, but it's also not helpful for the planet, let's say. So think about, there are a number of metrics. So think about, are you actually delivering value? How can you measure that? And what is your ability to deliver new ways of value? And that's a very different way of thinking. But as usual, whenever you talk about metrics or measurements, the biggest danger, we all know that, and certainly, again, that's the industrial way of looking at things, when a measurement becomes a target, an objective, something that you need to achieve. And then we all know that there's some sort of good hard law on that, saying that as soon as you start turning a metric into a target, it totally loses its meaning. It becomes pointless, because you know how we human beings are. Give us a target, and certainly if you would tie money or bonuses or incentives into that, whatever happens, we will make the target. Even if you have to lie for that or cheat or whatever, and then you lose transparency, you lose the value of the measurement. It will not help you. Yeah? And think about in this dynamic and world full of change, you want to keep doing this over and over again. You want to include this in your iterative incremental process, so that you look beyond singular data points and look at trend lines and patterns, and that will help you get an idea of how you're doing, rather than just overly focusing on one singular set of data points. Yeah? And think about in terms of your product life cycle, as your product grows and matures and changes and evolves and maybe expands or shrinks again, the definition of value might be changing. So keep that in mind too. Again, the idea of inspection adaptation applied on your definition of value. Now, that is not enough. This is arming for value. How to arm for value? Assign value, release, so that you can measure the impact and you can shift from output, to outcome. But that's not near enough. Why? Because it's in a way still measuring things is still inspection. It's capturing data, it's capturing information based on metrics or observations that you have, discussions that you have, feedback that you have received, that you will see from your consumer base. Inspection without adaptation is pointless. That applies to the events in Scrum, that applies to the daily Scrum, that applies to the sprint review. If you're only at those events talking about sort of the inspections, meaning the past, then it turns into status meetings, updates, justifications, and so on. That's not the point. The point of all those events, including the overarching event, the container event of sprint, is to have our eyes on the future, looking back in order to think, shape the future. That is what the adaptation part is about. If you're going through those events and organizing work in sprints without the ambition to use it to adapt, that's pointless. It will not help with regards to the waterfall way of working. Yeah? And that's where your arming for value turns into what I call an armada of value. To arm for value, assume, release, measure, and then adapt to your insights. Use your insights, use your measurements to adapt to them. Again, this goes back to the empirical process. And again, the importance of transparency. Your assumptions will be validated or invalidated. The fact that your assumptions are invalidated is really important information. So you want to accept that, you want to embrace that, You want to use that to learn from it and do things differently. If it's a target and whatever happens, we will achieve our target, then transparency will be totally lost. So in adapting for value, adapting upon those insights, one part that indeed could be adapted is what I call your Scrum zone, meaning the combination of the Scrum teams organized around a product. Because that measurement is the inspection, but you want to do an adaptation. You want to have a look at the skills of people, the formation of the teams. Are the teams correctly formed? Are they actually delivering an actual releasable increment? Is it completely done? What practices do they apply? What tools do they have? What systems do they have? Do they have access to systems? Do they have authorizations to systems? Can they organize their own testing? Whatever, think about all those things. Those are the things you should look at adaptation. So if your actual value is not what you hoped it would be, have a look at those things. How are we working? How are the Scrum teams working? How can we facilitate them even more? And there's lots of things that you can think about. And what was so, in a way, sad in all those agile transformations, that this was not the focus of people. This was the people driving or organizing those agile transformations, managing them, whatever, imposing things on people. It was not about how committed, how focused, how engaged are our people? How are our teams working together? Can they truly organize their own work? Do they have goals and boundaries within which to self-organize? Do they have the skills? What practices do they apply? Do they have all those things? Are we actually helping them by removing impediments? Are we actually not asking them to do low value stuff and so on? So there's lots of ways. This is a list I compiled, I think around 2015. I call it maximizing your Scrum. There are many ways to maximize your Scrum without adding people, without adding teams, without lots of other things. And that goes back to this idea of these agile transformations where you have this large, certainly large, but this picture sadly also applies to a lot of medium-sized and even small organizations, unfortunately, organized in silos with layers of management and whatever on top of them. And then they go to an agile transformation. And what do? They combine individuals into teams. And then they often have like small micro teams operating within the boundaries of departments and those silo structures that we have in place. And that's where you run into problems, because a team in Scrum for me is my definition of a team is not just a group of people. It's a group of people, a cross-functional collective of people that work against a shared purpose. And that shared purpose is creating valuable increments of product. Again, this idea of product comes back. So it's not about creating components of a product or sub-parts of a product or little interfaces of a product. No, it's creating end-to-end valuable increments of a product. So in that sense, establishing teams within those silos and departments, those are not teams for me. A team means it's focused on a product. So it's not people working together based upon governance and meetings and who should be doing what and contracts and handovers and so on. What unites people in a team is product, working for a product. And a product has consumers. The little pictures on outside of the organization. And a product has a product owner. And whether the product owner comes from business IT, I couldn't care less. The best placed person to manage that product end to end. And then in order to deliver valuable increments of a product, it's not enough to have people from certain departments in it only. You need to have people from different departments in it. And that's already where you run into problems, but because this is where you get this sort of these conflicts with existing organizational structures. And you know what? Delivering valuable increments of a product often requires more than just IT skills. You might need product management skills, business analyst skills, or functional, whatever, user research people. And then all facilitated by a Scrum Master. And that is a team. And that is the problem. You can't establish a team within existing silos and departments. But in all those agile transformations that I've seen, at least, people thought it could be. They're limited sort of, oh yeah, Scrum, that is for the teams. Oh yeah, we need teams. Let's form people into teams. But you know what? Let's not give up on hierarchy and line management and so on. That is not possible. To get more out of Scrum, we need to challenge that idea, start with product, and then make sure we have the right expertise and skills in the team to deliver done versions of that product. So in that sense, the definition of done for the product should define what expertise and skills you have in the team. And that sounds easy, but in practice, it seems to be the other way around. It seems to be that the availability of people and skills in the team defines the definition of done. But it shouldn't be, because it's the other way around. It should start with quality and then get the expertise and the skills in the team. By the way, this is also implementation of these ideas from the new product development game. Have a challenge, an objective, something in mind, something that needs to be built, a product that needs to be built, created, and so on. Make sure you bring all the expertise and the skills around that product, and then get out of the way, ask them to do their job without empiricism to that. So this is for me a team in Scrum. And this seems to be a problem because it will have an impact on the organizational structures. But it doesn't have to end there. Ultimately, you don't just want to adapt your Scrum zone, but you might want to adapt the organization for success. And that is essential for me currently, as I believe we are sort of entering this fourth wave of Scrum, meaning also that tornado phase of the technology adoption lifecycle. In that tornado phase, there are opportunities to use that new established product, that gorilla product, that gorilla offering, to really build on it and rethink how we work. And how I see that in terms of Scrum and adapting the organization, I feel like starting with what I call a product hub. So we have already identified, so establishing a Scrum team around the product is going to go across all those internal organizational barriers that we have in place. So let's start with product. On a product, we need to do different things. We need to deliver the product, obviously. You have to promote it, sell it, think about strategies or pricing strategies. I don't know, subscription models, think about the financial aspects of the problem, do user research, do competitive research, and so on. Lots of things need to happen around for a product. Now, the product owner, for me, should be at the heart of the product. Whether the product owner is from business, IT, former sales, product manager, I don't care. In a way, for me, in the world of Scrum, the professional life of product owner revolves around the product. Not a department, not some sort of line, whatever, but the product. For me, essentially, and that's a good start, developers, or what we used to call the development teams, you would use Scrum to deliver the product, to create increments of that product and release them into the market so that you can capture the impact of your product. That's where Scrum was born. That's where Scrum is really great. That's where it is, let's say, obvious to use Scrum. But although you would only use Scrum and the Scrum process, building on the 6 essential traits to deliver the product, still the product owner has a broader role to play, not just be part of the delivery of the product, but be the connection, creating the bridge between all those things that need to happen for a product, and then connect that to the Scrum team. Yeah. Now, within the organization, you've got stakeholders, you've got subject matter experts, people that can help you with certain expertise, certain insights that you probably need to develop the product. Yeah. And in a way, in a product hub, all those parties would be pulled towards the product, not be in their silos, not be in their department, but form a hub, a product hub, meaning a sort of organizational unit around the product. And in that organizational unit, whether they all do Scrum or not, in this picture they don't, it's just the delivery part that's doing Scrum. Whether they all do Scrum or not, I don't care, but they should be part of the product, part of that little organizational unit within the organization. so that you can move fast, make decisions, no delays, so that if you have to do marketing, then it's marketing for this product specifically, and that you organize that work as part of that product hub. And in that sense, that product hub is an implementation of things that were set in that old paper, 1986, the new product development game. In that sense, you create a little startup within the organization that they set their own initiative, they set their own agenda, they plan their own work, all for the product, where management actually becomes what I call that sponsor, sponsoring you, making sure that you can do your job, but in the end, getting out of the way. So that is almost literally quote 1986 from the new product development team. To get more out of your Scrum already, they said that this is what should be happening. And I've just expanded it to my product hub. And to give you an idea of that difficulty of picturing that on a traditional organization, we already know team goes across lots of organizational structures that we have in place. A product hub makes it even worse because we've got stakeholders within the organization, we've got subject matter experts within the organization, they may be business people, IT people, they may be traditional management people, part of leadership and whatever. And in a product hub, you want to bring those people together around the product in a new organizational construction, let's say. And that is the difficulty. Let me first say there's two ways to look at a product hub, how to use Scrum within the product hub. The first model is I think, the best model to start with a product owner at the heart of the product, using Scrum to deliver the product, and then the whole thing, the whole ecosystem facilitated by a Scrum Master or Scrum Masters. But if you really want to apply Scrum everywhere, I'm totally okay with that. But that means you would organize all of the other activities also in Scrum teams, using sprints, and contributing to delivering valuable increments of the product. Doesn't mean they have to be in one Scrum team, can be separate Scrum teams, but they have to organize their sprints then towards building valuable increments of the product. That's the more difficult thing, but I want to look far into the future, let's say. But in the end, re-emerging the structures around Scrum, meaning adapting the organization for value by forming product hubs. Remember again, products, the vehicle to deliver value. That means we put product front and center in everything we do, delivering it, promoting it, selling it, funding it, sponsoring it, following up on the financial aspects and the impact that we have, the value aspects. That meaning putting product front and center. That means gradually, and that's part of this, by doing this product by product by product, first of all, reimagine your Scrum for that product and then rethinking the structures around that instance of Scrum to further optimize for value. That means taking a little part of that pyramid structure and turning into a product hub and another part into a product hub until in the end, you've reformed gradually, iteratively, incrementally reformed the current organization into a networked structure of product hubs that are connected not so much by pure hierarchy or pure command and control, but by purpose. Why do we even exist as a company? What is our purpose? What is our mission as a company? And I believe as we are entering the tornado phase, that the organizations that will get the most out of Scrum will be the organizations that have the courage and the willingness and the eagerness, even the openness, that sense the urgency to really start updating, changing, adapting the organization. But it's going to require courageous Scrum Masters, whatever place of the universe they come from, to challenge what we are doing with Scrum. Because so far we have moved from massive use of waterfall now to sort of almost massive use of Scrum. But it's still this compliancy or this, I don't know, people holding back. We can do so much better. And this is the part where I need to apologize because we're close to the end of the time box. And this is the part that I felt, oh my God, Reversify or moving your Scrum Downfield actually consists of 3 big feedback loops. We know first big feedback loop, reimagine your Scrum, product by product by product. That is connected to re-emerging the structures around those instances of Scrum. So two feedback loops that are connected to each other. What I think is also really important is to use that implementation, that adoption of Scrum, to humanize the workplace, to re-energize people. Meaning, think about what makes people feel valued, what motivates people, how can we restore motivation of people, how can we show that thing, take it to the team. When in doubt, when you're not sure about things, even I hope you also realize that as a Scrum Master, take it to the team. A collection of people, a collection of brains that can really help you. And in the end, engagement is the key. You can optimize your Scrum, whatever. If you will not find a way to re-engage and re-energize people, it's not going to help anyhow. If we just use Scrum to keep up the rat race and hold on to that, it's not going to happen. So think about it. Now, I've been talking about it also past couple of years about engagement being the key. So you can look that up even on my YouTube channel and so on. But think about it. What motivates people? What makes people feel valued? How can we restore engagement of people? Because in the end, if people are really engaged, they will care about team outcomes. They will care about the customer. They will care about the enterprise. You don't even have to demand that. Create an organization where people find their engagement again. Thank you. So that was my almost full story. It was sort of the full story, except for the last part.
It's very, we just have a few minutes left, so let me take care of just a couple of housekeeping things. Gunther, will you be willing to supply your deck in a PDF
of course.
for me to send out to people? I think they would like that. And then the other question is, we have several questions. I'm putting you on the spot here, but would you be willing to answer some of them asynchronously if I send them to you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Yeah. And you could send that back to me. They're not, hopefully not hard questions.
Yeah, but if they are, I will make sure that I will answer with a better question.
So our first question came very early on, and there have been so many blogs and opinions centered around the failure of Agile and Scrum. Even making managers Scrum Masters, for example. What are your thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, it's a good one. Can I quickly want to go back to my presentation, if you're okay with that, and quickly go back to something very early on. So keep with me. So I ended my book in 2013 with that statement about the future of Scrum. I still believe in that, but I see people thinking that we are already there, and we are not. So if in my book I said, sorry for the thing. If I said the future state of Scrum will no longer be called Scrum. So I say what we now call Scrum will have become the norm and organizations have emerged around it. The problem today is that what people now call Scrum is not Scrum. They think it's the norm, it's the standard way of working. What we now call Scrum is not even Scrum, let alone that we have even started rethinking the organization around it. And then that's in a way sad. It sort of breaks my heart because we can do so much more with Scrum, but that's sort of the downside of success of Scrum. Whatever a lot of organizations call Scrum is not even close to what Scrum is designed to be. They just use the names and the terminology, but that's about it.
Yeah, and then when it doesn't work, they want to blame it on Scrum when it's
and that's the same with that movement from moving individuals into teams without touching the organization around it. It's never going to help. It is impossible to implement Scrum, to adopt Scrum without having an impact on all those things. How you work with people, how you review them, HR procedures, how you fund work. There's so much, the processes, the governance, or whatever, the focus of people, by not the multitasking thing, multi-projecting people, and so on, by changing all of that. So yeah, I see people say, okay, we're there. Scrum is everywhere. Yeah, but it's not even close to what Scrum is designed to be, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And I think it's time to stand up. That's why I'm talking about this. This is not something that massive amounts of people will get.
Yeah,
I'm very aware of that we need to move forward.
It's essentially a mindset shift again, right? So,
yeah, from that industrial mindset, volume-oriented thinking to that agile mindset. People,
right.
value, discovery.
So I think we have time for one more question. Sorry, we couldn't get to all of them. This actually comes from a member of our leadership team, Joe. By the way, thank you to our leadership team who's here today, Anu, Marco, Jeff, Joe, and Ange. Appreciate you guys can wave to everybody, but we see the nice picture in your background. But Joe asked, how about the value for the organization? He said, I believe that an organization that becomes good at quote or in parentheses their Scrum learns how to learn faster and thus increases its ability to pivot fast, becomes more resilient.
Yeah, that is absolutely true, but it also implies a sort of shift in a lot of leadership or management people. Let me give an example. What I've seen, certainly in Belgium, and I think in a lot of European countries, I don't know about the US, but certainly in Europe, after the Corona crisis, everybody's now being called back to the office. Although a lot of people shown and demonstrated that they can be trusted and so on, that is still, none of those companies went bankrupt because people had to work from home. But certainly people start pulling them back, calling them back to the office. And the only reason why they do that is because a lot of people on those management layers, their only reason of existing is controlling other people, not bringing value. So they just exist out, and so they want all those people back because otherwise they lose sort of the reason of existence. So that in itself is already a huge shift in what we are looking for. So yeah,
I think it's interesting.
sort of a metaphor as an answer. Yeah.